So I want you to picture something with me for a second. You are, you're standing on this metaphorical train platform.
Okay, I'm picturing.
Yeah, and it's cold. The lighting is just, that harsh fluorescent buzz. And you're staring down this endless set of tracks, just constantly checking your watch.
Yeah, just waiting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've been standing here for months, maybe, honestly, maybe even years. You've got all your bags packed, your itinerary is completely mapped out, and your destination is super clear in your mind.
Right.
And maybe that destination is delivering this massive presentation to your company's board, or maybe it's finally asking for that long overdue raise. Or, in the case of our deep dive today, maybe it's speaking an entirely new language with just absolute undeniable fluency.
Which is a huge goal for so many people.
It is, but here's the thing. You're not moving. You are just waiting for this magical, completely mythical train called confidence to arrive at the station.
Yeah, wow. That is such a common trap.
Yeah, right. We have this deep-seated human tendency to tell ourselves this very specific lie. We say, as soon as I feel completely ready, as soon as that train pulls in and I have zero lingering doubts in my mind, well, then I'll step onto the stage.
Yeah, we treat confidence like it's the non-negotiable ticket you have to buy to even participate in the journey.
Yes, exactly.
And, that framing really captures the paralysis so many people experience. We view absolute certainty as this strict prerequisite for action.
We really do.
And if we take that train platform metaphor just a step further, the people waiting on the platform, they aren't just idle. They're usually furiously reading books about how trains operate.
Oh, totally. They're studying the schedules.
Right. They're memorizing the physics of locomotion. They're imagining how great the ride will be. But because they don't feel this internal swell of bravery, they refuse to actually step anywhere near the edge of the tracks.
Because the anticipation of failure creates this invisible barrier.
Exactly. And so the default choice just becomes perpetual preparation. It feels productive, but it's fundamentally stagnant.
It's just spinning your wheels. But what if that entire psychological model is completely backward?
Which is the big question.
Right. What if the biggest, most debilitating lie we tell ourselves about mastering any new skill is that we actually need to feel confident before we open our mouths or take that first step?
Yeah, it's a huge paradigm shift.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. If you're listening to this, you are someone we affectionately refer to as the learner.
You're here because you have this insatiable curiosity.
Exactly. You want to bypass all that surface level fluff, and you are hunting for the actual unvarnished mechanics of mastery. And our mission today is to completely deconstruct those hidden mechanics.
And more importantly, to dissect the highly specific mindset required for advanced linguistic fluency.
Right. So to accomplish that mission today, we are dissecting a genuinely fascinating piece of source material. We're looking at the inaugural episode of a 5-day intensive English articulation challenge from an audio program called PodZone.
Yeah, and this challenge is led by 2 instructors, John and Emma.
Right, and their curriculum is laser focused on a very specific demographic, isn't it?
It is. It's targeted at advanced non-native speakers.
Yeah.
These are individuals who, they already possess a really deep internal comprehension of English grammar or vocabulary.
They know the rules.
Right, they know the rules intimately, but they're currently trapped trying to cross that final, incredibly frustrating bridge between knowing a language in their head and actually speaking it fluidly, dynamically, and naturally out in the real world.
Which is where so many people just get stuck. And right out of the gate, John and Emma drop this massive paradigm shift on their listeners. They take that myth of the confidence train we were just talking about, and they systematically dismantle it.
They really tear it down.
So today, you and I are going to unpack the underlying psychology of how they do that and how they replace it with this surprisingly simple, highly actionable daily blueprint for mastery.
But, before we even touch the physical mechanics of speaking.
Yeah, the tongue placement, breath control, all of that.
Right, the neuroscience of sound. Before any of that, we have to examine how these instructors frame the absolute starting line of this journey.
Because that initial framing is arguably the most critical component of their entire methodology.
It really is. Before Emma and John ask the listener to form a single syllable, they explicitly outline their baseline expectations. And what stands out immediately is what they purposely exclude from those expectations.
Yes, I noticed that too.
They state that they only require one singular prerequisite from the learner, and that's presence.
Just presence. And I have to pause here because my immediate reaction when I was reading this section of the source material was, honestly intense skepticism. Oh yeah, I highlighted this whole paragraph. They explicitly tell their audience that they do not want flawlessness. They aren't looking for an encyclopedic dictionary-level vocabulary.
Right.
They even go so far as to say they do not want native-level mimicry. They just ask the listener to, quote, commit to the process and simply show up.
Yeah.
Now, I have to push back on this underlying premise. We are talking about an advanced English challenge here. These are people trying to command international boardrooms and pass rigorous academic exams.
Right. High stakes.
Exactly. So is simply showing up really a high enough bar to set? I mean, shouldn't the standard for elite performance be a little more rigorous than, hey, thanks for being in the room today?
You know, I completely understand that skepticism. It does sound totally counterintuitive on the surface.
It really does.
Because if you're designing a program aimed at advanced mastery, conventional wisdom suggests you should establish an advanced, heavily guarded barrier to entry, right? To weed out the uncommitted.
Yeah, exactly. Put up a wall.
But if we analyze the psychological profile of the advanced language learner, the brilliance of this strategy becomes super clear. I mean, think about who this person is.
Okay.
They have likely spent the last decade of their life in traditional academic environments, just agonizing over irregular verbs, memorizing endless vocabulary lists, and being penalized with red ink for every microscopic grammatical error.
Yeah. The trauma of the red pen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're carrying a massive cognitive load of anxiety. They're exhausted by this relentless pursuit of an imaginary perfection.
So they're coming into this new challenge already defensive.
Yes.
They're waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting to be corrected.
Which is precisely the opposite of the state you want a learner in.
Right.
So by explicitly and publicly removing the burden of native-level mimicry in the first 2 minutes, John and Emma are drastically lowering that psychological barrier to entry. They are deliberately engineering a space of high psychological safety.
Okay, that makes sense. Because when you're terrified of making a mistake, your brain initiates a mild stress response, right?
Exactly. And that stress response actually tenses the muscles in your throat. It alters your breathing pattern, and it literally paralyzes your vocal cords.
Oh, wow. So it's a physical reaction.
Totally physical. You physically cannot speak fluently when you are braced for impact. So by demanding nothing more than presence, the instructors are disarming that physiological stress response before the real work even begins.
It's a calculated de-escalation.
Yes.
They're essentially telling the learner to just leave all their heavy accumulated baggage at the door. You don't need your highlighters, your dictionaries, or your fear of the red pen. Just bring your physical self and your attention.
And immediately after establishing that radically low barrier for entry, they execute this fascinating pivot.
Right, the motivation part.
Yeah. They ask their global audience to define their specific personal hurdles and their underlying motivations for taking the challenge in the first place.
Yeah, the source text lists out several potential reasons learners might be there. Things like seeking professional advancement, pursuing academic rigor, preparing for global exploration, trying to pass a specific standardized exam like the IELTS.
Right, which is huge.
Or simply possessing a deep desire to speak with elegance and precision. But this brings up another logistical question for me.
What's that?
Well, why spend precious time at the very beginning of what is supposed to be a quick 5-minute daily challenge, asking people to dwell on their personal motivations? I mean, they even ask the listeners to visualize their home country's flag and post their location in the comments. When you only have a few minutes a day to practice articulation, turning the session into this philosophical exploration of one's goals feels like a massive detour.
It might feel like a detour if you view language purely as a tool, like a hammer or a wrench.
Right.
But if we connect this to the broader field of behavioral psychology, establishing that motivation is the foundation of the entire habit loop.
Okay, unpacking that a bit.
Well, categorizing these motivations, forcing the learner to distinguish between the gritty, structured academic rigor needed for an IELTS exam versus the more abstract, artistic desire for personal elegance, proves a vital point.
Which is?
That mastering a language at an advanced level is no longer about basic survival communication. It's fundamentally an identity shift.
An identity shift? Okay, I want to dig into that. What exactly do you mean by that in this context?
Well, when you're a beginner, learning basic tourist phrases, your motivation is purely transactional, right? It's survival-based.
Yeah, you just want to locate the train station, order a coffee, or find a bathroom.
Exactly. The stakes for your ego are very, very low. But when you transition to wanting to speak with, say, elegance and precision. You are attempting to project your true intellect, your subtle humor, your charisma, and your core personality into a completely different linguistic code.
Oh, man. That is incredibly vulnerable.
It is. It threatens your sense of self because temporarily you sound less intelligent than you actually are.
Right, because you have these complex thoughts, but you can only express them like a toddler.
Exactly. So by asking learners to define their specific why and to publicly claim their geographic location, the instructors are forcing the learner to anchor their adult identity to the task.
That distinction is fascinating. It's the difference between a vague wish like, I want my English to sound better, and a concrete mandate like, I am a senior financial analyst in Tokyo and I need the linguistic authority to command respect in an international boardroom.
Perfectly said. The first one is easily abandoned when it gets hard.
Right, but the second one is tied to who you are as a human being.
And that defined concrete why acts as the anchor. That's what will keep the learner tethered during the rigorous, repetitive, and honestly often frustrating daily practice that is about to follow.
Because if the identity isn't anchored, the friction of the practice will easily snap the habit. So, assuming the learner is present, the baggage of perfectionism is left at the door, and their motivation is deeply anchored in their identity, they immediately slam into that psychological wall we discussed at the top of the show.
Ah, yes. The train platform.
The overpowering desire to wait for the train of confidence. Let's get into what John calls the confidence paradox, because this was just the absolute highlight of the source text for me.
It's a genuine paradigm shift for most adult learners. The source text points out this internal monologue that almost every advanced learner suffers from.
Oh, I know it well.
It usually sounds something like, I'll start speaking up in meetings once my grasp of the past perfect continuous tense is absolutely unshakable.
Or, I'll finally engage in casual conversation at the water cooler when I have memorized 50 more idiomatic expressions.
Exactly. It's the trap of perpetual preparation.
And the text fiercely argues that confidence is not a precursor to speaking. You don't, gather confidence in a bucket and then speak. Confidence is strictly a byproduct of having spoken.
Right. And to illustrate this, Emma and John utilize a highly effective analogy in the source material. They compare language learning to the mastery of a complex psychomotor skill, specifically playing a musical instrument.
Okay, I love this analogy.
They point out that a person could study music theory indefinitely. You could sit in your living room and watch thousands of hours of YouTube videos featuring virtuoso concert pianists.
Just analyzing every movement.
Yeah, you could read textbooks on the principles of harmony, rhythm, syncopation, complex chord progressions, until you possess a literal PhD-level intellectual understanding of music.
But none of that intellectual understanding translates to the physical world until your fingers actually press the keys.
Exactly.
You aren't a musician. You're just a highly educated fan of music.
That's a great way to put it.
I was turning this over in my head, and it reminded me of another analogy that I think amplifies this dynamic perfectly.
Let's hear it.
Imagine trying to learn how to ride a bicycle strictly by reading dense physics textbooks.
Oh, yeah. That would end terribly.
Right. You could memorize the exact required angle of momentum needed for a turn. You could mathematically map out the gyroscopic effect of the spinning wheels, the exact center of gravity required to maintain an upright posture, the vector forces of the pedals.
You could get an A+ on a written test about bicycle physics.
Exactly. But the moment you actually sit on the seat,
You're going to fall over immediately.
Because if you never actually get on the bike, your nervous system doesn't know how to ride. You don't just need the theory. You desperately need the physical wobble.
The wobble is essential.
You almost need that initial loss of balance and the scrape on the knee to teach your vestibular system and your muscles how to actually interact with gravity.
And that analogy maps perfectly onto the neuroscience of language acquisition. The term the instructors use in the text for that wobble, or for the sensation of the finger pressing the piano key, is kinesthetic feedback.
Kinesthetic feedback.
Yes, and this is a profoundly important concept in educational psychology and motor learning. Traditional language learning, especially in standardized school systems across the globe, it heavily prioritizes theory over physical action.
Oh, without a doubt.
The system rewards the student who can quietly sit at a desk, and pass the multiple-choice written grammar test.
Which creates a perpetual institutionalized state of deferring actual practice.
Exactly, because the written test feels incredibly safe.
It does. You have time to think. You can erase a mistake on paper before anyone ever sees it.
But you can't unsay a word that awkwardly tumbles out of your mouth with the wrong intonation.
There is no backspace button in real-time conversation.
And that lack of a backspace button is terrifying, which is exactly why people avoid it. But the phrase kinesthetic feedback forces a confrontation with reality.
Break down kinesthetic for us.
Sure. Kinesthetic refers to the sensory perception of body movements. So in the context of language, it means the literal physical sensation of your tongue pressing against the alveolar ridge behind your teeth to make a T sound.
Ah, okay.
It's the physical vibration you feel in your larynx when you activate your vocal cords. It's the muscular shape of your lips and the diaphragmatic control of your breath.
Wow, so it is deeply physical.
Extremely. The pod zone text is stating unequivocally that this raw physical sensation is the only thing that actually builds the skill of speaking.
So passive mental absorption of grammar rules simply does not build fluency.
It does not. Only the physical, muscular act of producing sound generates the biological feedback loop required to eventually trigger a feeling of confidence.
Okay, so if confidence is solely derived from the physical act of speaking, from accumulating that kinesthetic feedback, the next logical question for anyone attempting this is exactly how much speaking is required to see tangible results.
Right. How much of that wobble do you need?
Because the cultural mythology around language learning is filled with stories of total immersion. You know, we hear about people moving to a foreign country, throwing away their native language dictionary, and speaking for 12 exhausting hours a day until they just crack the code.
Which is an incredibly intense approach.
But this specific challenge from PodZone is entirely architected around a mere 5-minute daily habit.
Yes, and this is where the conversation naturally shifts from the philosophy of action into the sheer, hard biological mechanics of learning.
Okay, let's get into the biology.
The source text introduces the concept of neuroplasticity, which is the brain's remarkable ability to physically form and reorganize synaptic connections, especially in response to learning or experience.
Right.
And neuroplasticity thrives on one primary fuel source: frequency.
Frequency. Okay, and the instructors make a massive, incredibly bold claim regarding frequency. Emma states that just 5 minutes of deliberate, focused daily practice is exponentially more impactful than a sporadic, hour-long session once a week.
They do say that.
I have to be honest, I'm looking at this math and I'm highly skeptical again.
Let's do the arithmetic.
Let's do it. If you do 5 minutes a day for 7 days, that's 35 minutes total for the entire week. Are they seriously suggesting that 35 minutes spread out in tiny, bite-sized chunks can really outpace a dedicated, intensely focused 60-minute tutoring session with a professional on a Saturday morning?
It sounds counterintuitive.
It sounds like a marketing gimmick, frankly, designed for modern, short attention spans, not a rigorous academic protocol.
I would absolutely share that exact skepticism if we were talking about accumulating raw, factual information.
Like what?
Like memorizing the dates of historical battles or learning the periodic table. In those cases, a 60-minute deep dive might actually be superior.
Okay.
But language articulation isn't primarily a knowledge acquisition task. As we established, it's a physiological and neurological adaptation.
Right, the kinesthetic feedback.
Yes. So if we break down the biological why behind the text claim, it revolves around proactive engagement and something called myelination.
Okay, take me into the biology of myelination. How does that explain the 5-minute rule?
Okay, so when you are learning a new physical skill, whether that's a tennis serve, a piano chord, or a new phonetic sound in English, your brain fires electrical signals down specific neural pathways.
Right.
The more frequently those specific pathways are fired, the brain recognizes that this circuit is important for survival or success. So in response, specialized cells called oligodendrocytes begin wrapping a fatty substance called myelin around those neural pathways.
Wow. Okay. It's like wrapping rubber insulation around an electrical wire in a house.
That is the perfect visualization. Yes. Yeah. And the thicker the myelin sheath, the faster, stronger, and more efficiently the electrical signal travels.
Okay.
That speed and efficiency are what we experience as fluency or muscle memory. But here's the catch. Myelination is triggered by frequency, not just duration.
Oh, okay. That's the distinction.
Yes. If you practice a physical skill intensely for 1 hour on a Saturday, you get a spike in signaling. But what happens during the 6 days of inactivity between sessions?
The brain just sort of forgets.
Basically. The brain, which is incredibly stingy with its metabolic energy, assumes the pathway is no longer vital. So the signal decays. The insulation process stalls.
Wow.
But when you practice for 5 minutes every single day, you are constantly pinging the brain with a daily mandate. You are telling your nervous system, this pathway is essential. Keep building the myelin.
So the frequency of the signal prevents the brain from pruning the pathway. It's like you're walking the path through the forest every day so the weeds don't grow back.
Exactly.
But I still struggle with the idea that an hour of intense focus is somehow actively bad. I mean, why wouldn't I just do an hour of this out loud practice every single day to get the myelin faster? If 5 minutes is good, isn't 60 minutes 12 times better?
You'd think so, but because of the stress response, it's not. The text makes a vital clarification here. John points out that the objective of the 5 minutes is not immaculate delivery or rapid-fire speech. The sole objective is articulation. When an adult learner sits down for a massive 1 hour spoken cram session, they invariably trigger exhaustion, frustration, and performance anxiety.
Because it's hard work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you are frustrated, your brain floods with cortisol and other stress hormones. Those hormones actively impede neuroplasticity. The brain literally switches from learning mode to defense mode.
Oh, wow. So you literally stress yourself out of the ability to absorb the skill.
Exactly. A consistent low-barrier 5-minute repetition slips under the radar of your anxiety. It's too short to trigger a massive cortisol spike.
It's like sneaking past the guards.
It allows the brain to structurally adapt without triggering the emotional exhaustion of a marathon session.
It's a brilliant workaround because it also completely obliterates the most common excuse in the world, which is, I don't have time.
Everyone has 5 minutes.
Right. Everyone, no matter how busy they are, has 5 minutes. You can do it in the shower. You can do it during a commute while driving. So, knowing that a 5-minute low-stress daily loop is the biological sweet spot for myelination, the next obvious question for you listening right now is, what exactly are you supposed to do during those 5 minutes? Are you just supposed to talk to yourself in the mirror about the weather?
Well, the source material outlines a very precise, structured methodology for those 5 minutes.
Thank goodness.
The challenge requires learners to listen intently to 20 specific pre-recorded phrases and then repeat them aloud. But the instruction isn't just about parroting the words on a page.
What's the difference?
The critical directive from Emma is to strive to emulate the prosody, rhythm, and intonation of the speaker. And she encourages the learner to not hesitate to repeat a single phrase multiple times until it feels right.
Emulation. That is such an interesting word choice. When I was reading this section, I immediately thought about how people learn their favorite songs.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Think about driving in your car, listening to a track you absolutely love. When you sing along, you don't just read the lyrics deadpan off a sheet of paper in a robotic monotone voice.
You'd sound ridiculous if you did.
Right. You actively mimic the singer. You try to catch the exact millisecond where they take a breath. You lean into the melody. You mimic the emotional pauses, the vocal fry, the swagger. You are trying to capture the entirety of the performance, not just the raw data of the vocabulary.
And that musical comparison is the perfect translation of the technical linguistic terms the instructors are utilizing. Let's dissect those 3 terms to understand why they are so vital: prosody, rhythm, and intonation.
Let's do it.
Prosody is essentially the overarching melody of speech. It encompasses the stress, the timing, and the emotional resonance that conveys meaning far beyond the literal dictionary definitions of the words.
Right. The difference between saying a flat, I'm so happy to see you, versus a melodic, enthusiastic, I'm so happy to see you. The data is the same, but the prosody changes the human connection entirely.
Exactly. Then you have rhythm. English is what linguists call a stress-timed language.
Stress-timed, okay.
This means the time interval between stressed syllables is roughly equal, which forces speakers to squash and compress unstressed syllables together, often reducing them to a quick sound, known as a schwa.
Okay, yeah. Like saying bottle of water becomes almost bottle of water.
Precisely. And this is vastly different from a syllable-timed language like Spanish or French, where each syllable generally gets equal time and weight.
Ah, I see.
So when an advanced learner from a syllable-time background tries to speak English by giving equal weight to every word, it sounds incredibly choppy and unnatural, regardless of how perfect their grammar is.
They are essentially playing the wrong time signature for the genre of music.
That is exactly it. And finally, intonation, which is the pitch of your voice. how your voice naturally rises at the end of a query to signal a question, or falls decisively at the end of a statement to signal authority.
Okay, so by explicitly instructing the learner to focus on prosody, rhythm, and intonation, the PodZone text elevates the daily practice from mere vocabulary memorization to mastering the actual music of the English language.
It transitions from a data entry task into a performance art.
I love that.
And notice how the instructors reiterate a core philosophy during this instruction. The goal isn't perfection, it's practice.
Which goes back to the safety net we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And this is biologically crucial. Multiple clumsy, stumbling attempts at matching the rhythm, literally tripping over your own tongue to find the downbeat, are neurologically far more valuable than one perfectly constructed, slowly delivered, monotone sentence.
Because you are training the physical muscles of your mouth to dance to a foreign beat, the stumbling is the kinesthetic feedback doing its job.
Yes, you need the stumble.
That makes total sense. So we have the method down.
Yeah.
Emulate the speaker, treat the language like a musical performance, and focus heavily on generating that physical kinesthetic feedback.
Right.
But the actual content of the 20 phrases provided in this PodZone challenge is equally, if not more, vital. They don't have the listener repeating random conversational filler, right?
No, not at all.
You aren't practicing sentences about going to the library, returning a sweater, or ordering a sandwich. The curriculum design uses the phonetic practice itself to fundamentally reprogram the learner's internal mindset.
It's brilliant.
Let's analyze the first thematic group of phrases from the challenge, which are surgically targeted at dismantling perfectionism.
This is where the pedagogical design of the challenge truly shines. The linguistic practice acts as a Trojan horse for psychological conditioning.
A Trojan horse. I like that.
Let's examine the specific affirmations the host, Emma, guides the listener through.
Okay, the first phrase is, I consciously choose progress over the illusion of perfection. And the next one is, I refuse to let a lack of confidence be a barrier to communication.
Pay close attention to the verb choices here.
Yeah.
Consciously choose and refuse.
Strong words.
Very strong. These are not passive statements of hope. They are aggressive declarations of personal agency.
Here are two more from that same section. Imperfections are opportunities for linguistic refinement. And I persist in speaking, even in the face of apprehension. I just have to point out the deeply layered, almost meta nature of this specific exercise.
It is so meta.
Think about what is happening physically. You are literally practicing advanced English articulation by speaking out loud sentences designed to convince your brain that it is acceptable to make mistakes in English.
Exactly.
If you happen to stumble or mispronounce a syllable while trying to say the word imperfections, you are actively proving the exact point of the sentence in real time.
It's an incredibly robust psychological loop. And this touches on a major concept in cognitive behavioral therapy regarding cognitive framing.
Okay, how so?
Well, we discussed earlier how advanced adult learners suffer from debilitating performance anxiety. These specific phrases are engineered to act as a psychological shield.
A shield against the anxiety.
Yes. By vocalizing a phrase like, I persist in speaking, even in the face of apprehension, notice what the learner is not doing. They're not pretending that the fear doesn't exist.
Right. This isn't toxic positivity where you just smile and say everything is fine.
Exactly. They aren't saying, I am perfectly calm and brave. They are admitting they are scared.
They are actively acknowledging the apprehension. They are likely feeling the physical symptoms of that anxiety in their body at that very moment.
But by vocalizing their power over it, they change their relationship to the fear. They are combining mindset resilience training with phonetic mouth muscle practice.
You are hacking your own brain's internal monologue. In psychology, there's a concept where we observe our own behavior to figure out what we believe.
Right. Self-perception theory.
Yeah. If your internal monologue is silently screaming, I'm going to mess this up, people will judge my accent, you are forcefully overriding that internal radio station by using your actual physical vocal cords to broadcast, I am choosing progress.
And because you are saying it aloud, you are generating that physical vibration, that kinesthetic feedback again.
It always comes back to the feedback.
Always. Your brain's auditory processing center is hearing your own voice state these truths. From a neurological standpoint, hearing your own voice articulate a belief is exponentially more persuasive to your subconscious than just reading it silently on a page.
But vocalizing over your fear only gets you out of the starting blocks, right?
True.
Once that initial apprehension is managed and perfectionism is discarded, a vacuum is created. The brain needs a new metric to obsess over, because if you aren't focused on being flawless, what are you focused on?
And the text anticipates this perfectly.
It really does. It guides the learner toward an obsession with tiny incremental steps. Let's pull up the next thematic group of phrases from the challenge.
This section shifts the psychological focus from defending against fear to building a sustainable long-term architecture for growth.
Okay, the phrases are, marginal gains accumulate into significant advancements. Next, I appreciate the incremental nature of linguistic mastery. Then, I refrain from comparing my linguistic journey to that of others. And the final one in this block is, my only benchmark for comparison is my former self.
The inclusion of marginal gains is a fascinating cross-pollination of disciplines here.
Where does that usually come from?
That concept is most famously utilized in high-performance athletics and corporate business turnarounds. It's the philosophy that a 1% improvement in a dozen small areas, repeated daily, results in massive, exponential compounding growth over time.
Now, I have to pose a real-world dilemma for you listening, because this is where theory meets reality.
Okay, bring it on.
The source material mentioned earlier that some of the learners are doing this challenge to ace the IELTS exam, or they are fighting tooth and nail for professional advancement in cutthroat industries.
Very true.
In the real world, those are intensely competitive environments. You are quite literally being graded against an objective standard, or you are competing head-to-head against a colleague for a single promotion.
The stakes are real.
So given those stakes, is it actually realistic or even helpful to tell a learner to only compare themselves to their former self? If you absolutely need a Band-Aid on the IELTS to get your visa, the exam board certainly isn't comparing you to your former self. They are comparing you to a rigid rubric.
That is a highly pragmatic pushback, and it's the exact hurdle many ambitious learners stumble over. The real world is undeniably competitive, and standards exist for a reason.
Exactly.
However, we have to return to the text's primary goal, cultivating a robust habit and sustaining a disciplined English practice. There is a critical difference between the evaluation of a skill and the process of acquiring that skill.
Okay, break that down for me. Evaluation versus process.
The IELTS examiner's job is evaluation. That's the end of the line. But if the learner's daily practice involves constantly comparing their current, messy, incremental progress to the flawless, idealized standard of an IELTS Band 9, or to a native-speaking colleague, what happens biologically?
I'm guessing cortisol again?
Exactly. The comparison triggers a massive deficit mindset. It reignites the exact lack of confidence that shuts down the vocal cords. The anxiety returns, the cortisol spikes, the neuroplasticity shuts off, and the daily habit dies entirely.
It's like standing at the base of Mount Everest, looking all the way up at the peak, realizing how impossibly far away it is, and just sitting down on the trail in despair. You defeat yourself before you take 10 steps.
To keep moving up the mountain, you have to force your eyes down to look only at your feet.
Wow, just one step at a time.
Right. The instructors are addressing the psychology required for the process of learning. Measuring marginal gains against who you were yesterday is the only sustainable psychological metric that keeps that 5-minute daily myelination loop running without the interruption of despair.
So the comparison is essentially a firewall.
Yes. You may be competing with others in the boardroom eventually, but during the 5 minutes of daily practice, your ego must only compete with your former self. It's a psychological firewall designed solely to protect the habit.
That firewall distinction is incredibly clarifying.
Yeah.
You can't drive a car safely if you are constantly staring at the destination on the map. You have to look at the road 10 feet in front of your bumper.
Perfect analogy.
So we are tolerating imperfection. We are focusing on incremental marginal gains through a daily habit, and we are ignoring the competition. Where does this 5-minute loop ultimately lead?
To the finish line.
The final set of phrases in the PodZone text reveals the end goal, which ties back to what we discussed earlier, a completely transformed linguistic identity.
We move from the foundational mechanics of how to practice to the ultimate vision of who the practice creates. Let's analyze these final forward-looking phrases.
Emma leads this section with, "Today marks the genesis of my next chapter in English articulation," she follows with, "I am poised to articulate my thoughts with greater nuance and precision. Then, I am evolving into an intuitive and natural English communicator."
Notice the momentum building there.
Yeah, and the next one is my absolute favorite. "My future self will appreciate the discipline I exhibit today." And the final affirmation of the challenge is, "I am convinced of my potential to achieve comprehensive fluency in English."
From a linguistic standpoint, Notice the massive shift in tense and perspective here compared to the earlier phrases.
Yes. But before we analyze the tense, I just have to say I deeply resonate with the concept of my future self will appreciate the discipline I exhibit today.
It's a powerful thought.
I try to utilize this mental model in my own life all the time. It frames discipline not as a punishment, but as an act of generosity.
Oh, I like that phrasing.
Right. It's like doing a massive favor for a friend, only that friend happens to be you waking up tomorrow morning or you waking up a year from now. You are doing the hard, physically uncomfortable work of making these sounds today so that your future self can just naturally open their mouth in a meeting and speak without a spike in heart rate.
They get to freely enjoy the fluent architecture that you are sweating to build right now.
Exactly.
And framing discipline as an act of future generosity is a highly effective way to bypass present moment procrastination. In clinical psychology, this specific technique is identified as future pacing.
Future pacing. Okay, how does that work?
The text intentionally guides the learner from acknowledging their present struggle, which they reframe as the genesis of my next chapter, to inhabiting a state of absolute, unwavering certainty about the outcome. I am convinced of my potential.
It's an entire hero's journey compressed into the span of 20 sentences. You start with fear, you move to marginal gains, and you end with absolute conviction.
Yes. Future pacing involves vividly and emotionally imagining a future scenario where you have already achieved the desired outcome. When the learner vocalizes this future identity out loud, saying, I am evolving into an intuitive communicator, they reinforce that crucial commitment to showing up that John and Emma demanded at the very beginning of the challenge.
Because you're speaking it into existence.
Right. You aren't just practicing a random assortment of verbs and nouns. You are verbally trying on the psychological identity of a fluent speaker. You are stepping into their posture, adopting their mindset, and speaking from their perspective.
Which brings us full circle to the beginning. The identity shift is complete. You are no longer identifying as a struggling, anxious student waiting on the platform. You're identifying as a future master in active training. You are on the tracks.
And that profound identity shift brings us to the conclusion of the formal guided challenge within the source text.
But it's not actually the end, is it?
No, it's not. Emma and John introduce one final, crucial supplementary instruction right before they sign off. They don't just say goodbye and leave the learner to their day.
No, they don't. And this final step is arguably where the true, durable forging of fluency occurs.
Absolutely.
After completely running through all 20 phrases aloud, Emma assigns a highly specific piece of homework. She tells the listener, revisit today's practice 1 or 2 more times on your own. You'll be struck by how much more fluidly the phrases come to you on the second pass. A third repetition will render them even more instinctive.
And then they ask the learners to cement this solitary practice by going to the comments section of the platform and typing day 1 executed.
Which instantly raised a logistical question for me.
Oh.
Yeah, if repetition is the absolute key to neuroplasticity and myelination, why didn't the instructors just run through the list 3 times during the actual recorded session?
That's a fair question.
Why force the learner to pause, rewind, or navigate the exercise entirely on their own time? Wouldn't it be far more user-friendly to just make the audio a few minutes longer and guide them through it?
It would certainly be more convenient for the user, but from a pedagogical standpoint, it would be far less effective.
Why is that?
Because this specific instruction is the ultimate real-world test of the kinesthetic feedback theory we spent so much time exploring. Consider what is happening during the first pass of the audio.
Okay.
When you are listening to Emma speak and you are repeating immediately after her, you are relying entirely on her cognitive scaffolding. She is providing the melody, she is establishing the rhythm, she is carrying the heavy cognitive load of pacing.
She is essentially acting like the training wheels on a bicycle. You feel like you're riding, but she's the one actually keeping the bike upright.
Precisely. By forcing the learner to initiate the second and third passes entirely independently, without the immediate safety net of her voice leading the way, the instructors mandate autonomous application.
They make you take the training wheels off.
Exactly. This relates to what psychologists call desirable difficulty. The brain has to work harder to recall the prosody and the rhythm on its own.
You have to generate the music from memory using only your own muscles.
And something truly remarkable happens neurologically when you do that. Because you just spent the last 5 minutes intensely focused on the physical muscle movements, the second pass genuinely will feel physically easier.
Because the pathways are already primed.
Right. Your tongue knows where to go, your jaw is relaxed, your Diaphragmatic breath is already regulated to the phrasing. It provides the learner with real-time, undeniable proof that they are improving.
It's an instant return on investment.
They don't have to wait 6 months to see the results of their labor. They feel the marginal gain in their own body within 5 minutes.
That is so powerful.
That realization that the second attempt feels physically smoother in the mouth than the first attempt is the exact moment that, as John says in the text, fluency is forged. It builds an immediate, deeply internalized loop of self-efficacy.
It's undeniable proof of concept. The learner realizes, oh my gosh, the theory is real. I actually can do this. The friction is already fading.
And then, taking the time to write, day one, executed in the comments, serves as that final public seal of approval on the habit.
It takes a private internal victory and makes it a public reality.
It closes the psychological loop, completely cementing the identity shift from a passive consumer of audio to an active, disciplined executor of a daily habit.
What an incredible architecture for learning. To briefly recap this expansive journey we've been on today, we have covered a massive amount of ground based on this single pod zone challenge.
We really have.
We started by examining the necessity of replacing the exhausting, paralyzing prerequisite of perfection with the simple, radical requirement of mere physical presence.
Just showing up.
Just showing up. We unpacked the hard psychological truth that confidence always follows action. It is a byproduct of the work, not a magical precursor to it.
We dove deep into the neuroscience of myelination too.
Right, to understand why just 5 minutes of daily focused articulation physically rewires your brain circuitry faster and more permanently than a sporadic hour of stressful cramming.
And we dissected how vocalizing your mindset through highly specific, targeted affirmations actively protects your fragile habit from the crushing weight of perfectionism and comparison.
It truly is a comprehensive, sophisticated system of behavioral psychology disguised as a simple 5-minute vocal exercise.
It's a masterclass in habit design.
It really is. And I want to remind you, the learner, that the principles we extracted and discussed today aren't just abstract academic theories to ponder. They are a highly practical, immediately accessible toolkit.
You don't have to wait to use it.
No. You can literally apply this philosophy today. You don't need to wait for a Monday to start. You don't need to buy a pristine new notebook or a massive textbook. You can start right now with just 5 minutes of activating your vocal cords, embracing the inevitable wobble of the bicycle, and generating that crucial kinesthetic feedback.
The barrier to entry has been lowered as far as it can possibly go. The only thing required to begin is your presence.
But to bring our deep dive to a close today, I want to leave you with a broader, perhaps more provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this entire episode extrapolating from the core theme of language learning, but let's take a massive step back and look at your life as a whole.
Okay, zooming out.
If we truly accept the premise that John and Emma presented, the scientifically backed premise that confidence is strictly a byproduct of physical action and kinesthetic feedback, and never ever a precursor, what other major goals in your life are you currently delaying?
Oh, that's a tough question.
Where else in your career, your relationships, or your personal growth are you standing idly on that cold platform, waiting for a train of confidence that is simply never going to arrive? Because realistically, the only way to earn the ticket is to just jump down onto the tracks and start walking.
It's a sobering realization. The confidence you are waiting for is hidden inside the work you are avoiding.
Until next time, keep learning, keep speaking, and stop waiting for the train. Just step into the arena.